Our next speaker is Doug Gaffin, who will be talking about evidence of learning walks related to scorpion burrow navigation.
Can you hear me, Linda? Can
Sorry.
anyone?
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay, and you can see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks everyone for joining me, and I really appreciate it. I want to first thank my co-collaborator, Maria Munoz, who's an undergraduate biology student here at the University of Oklahoma. We want to share with you some of our evidence of learning walks in scorpions and try to explain why we think they're so important for navigation. Now, first of all, scorpions make these burrows from which they emerge at night in the sand, and somehow they find their way back to their burrow. And it's this getting back to the burrow that's really at the heart of our research. Now, there's a really elegant and simple hypothesis for how ants and bees get back. It's called the navigation by scene familiarity hypothesis. And we think scorpions might be doing something similar, but instead of using vision, they're using chemical and tactile information gathered by their pectins. So simply put, to get home, a scorpion would taste and feel around with its pectins. If it tastes and feels something familiar, it walks forward. If not, it tastes around some more and it repeats. Now, for this hypothesis to have traction, there are two crucial events that have to be in place. One, there must be enough sensory complexity to match the environmental complexity. And two, there has to be a way to generate the initial homebound paths. Let's start with sensor complexity, and let's look at scorpions. Now, I think everyone in this room knows about scorpions on pectins. They hang mid-ventrally from all animals. They're composed of a flexible spine and a series of teeth. And on the tips of each of the teeth, on the distal ground-facing surfaces, are tens to hundreds of small peg sensilla. And looking down on just a patch of these sensilla, you see they're all lined up in the same orientation. And this is a look right down the throat of a single peg. You see there's a slit-shaped pore that allow chemicals access. And if you make a longitudinal cut through a single peg, you see they're composed of a population of chemosensitive neurons, and as well as at least one mechanosensory neuron that responds when the peg bends. Now, we think these peg sensilla are much like QR codes. That is, maybe the scorpion experiences its world as a series of QR codes. And as you know, in QR codes, there's enormous information content. Well, the same is true for pegs. And based on our physiology studies, we estimate really conservatively that scorpions can detect at minimum 10 to the 12th to 10 to the 40th different possible patterns. So it's clear that scorpions have enormous complexity in these pectins. And at last year's AAS, my student, Albi Moussaillon, developed this really cool simulation of scorpion pectins. Now, I can't go into the details of this, but simply put, you can see that using this very simple algorithm, this simulated pectin is able to retrace a training path. Now, I hope you're asking at this point, how do you get home the first time? It's all well and good that you can memorize a training path and then retrace it, but how do you get the initial training path laid down? Well, that's a great question, and it really comes to the second part. So there's two pieces, two ways to initiate your training path. One is called path integration, and the other is learning walks. In path integration, the animal comes out of its burrow, and the outbound legs of each of these movements is integrated to compute a homebound vector. Now, this has been well documented in many animals. Probably the most famous is the study from Vayner and Vayner, where the inbound path was calculated quite precisely. Now, do scorpions have learning walks? Well, I can't get too far into this either, but just this last year in animal cognition, there was a study using scorpions in a circular filled sand arena, and they found evidence that scorpions also perform path integration. So it looks like we can check that off for scorpions, but what about learning walks? And this is really the heart of this particular paper. So the first job was to get the animals to feel at home. You've got to get them to burrow in a naturalistic situation. So this took me to my sabbatical this last fall at the Sevieta Field Station. It's about an hour south of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I stayed at the UNM Sevieta station right there and collected from a dune about 5 kilometers away. And these are the locations of the animals we collected, and we brought them back to the field station and did our work. We first wanted to look at different substrate types. So we tested a loamy substrate, an arroyo sand, a river sand, and a native sand. And we simply made these rat cages and put layers of sand across the bottom and put a scorpion in and let them go overnight to see what they did. And I'll just show you a couple of examples. In this arroyo sand, the animal hunkered down but didn't make much of a burrow. But over here in this native sand taken from their habitat, the scorpions made pretty good burrows. So we next wanted to try to sloping the sand against one of the arena walls. So we did the same thing, and we put an animal in and we let them go overnight to see what they did. And here are 4 examples. This is arroyo sand making sort of kind of a half-baked burrow. But the native sands made really nice burrows. Here's one that's inside. Here's a second one it made. The river sand made burrows, but the integrity was not so good. We next wanted to try to move the animals away from the wall, so we tried mounding in the center of the cages, and we just looked at native and river sand, put animals in and watched what they did. And the next day, you can see that the animals particularly were interested in working the native sand. We next tried to see if moisture would make a difference. So we did 2 things. We either put sand in a dish and mixed it with water and then made the burrow or the mound, or we just put dry sand in the arena and then misted from above with some squirts of water. And then we put an animal in, and you can see that the animal definitely preferred the second technique, and it made a really nice burrow, and it actually maintains its structure quite well. Well, we want to think about the time frame. When do they start making these burrows? So we went outside my casita and we set up several replicates and over several days, and simply put, the animals made, again, very nice burrows in these arenas. And in this summary of the data, we put them all in at 6 p.m. the previous night. We let them go and we monitored them every hour. And by about 10 to 12 hours, essentially the next morning, essentially all the animals were burrowing or in their burrows. So we moved this to a lab situation, and we made this arena, which composed of a drain pan that's got a thin layer of sand, and we would make a mound somewhere in this pan and mist from the top. It's atop a turntable and on top of a mat to reduce vibrations. We put a black curtain around it, suspended by a hula hoop. I bought it at Walmart. We have these lights that are on timers, and this camera is an infrared camera that goes to a computer for processing. And this is what it actually looks like, and we made 4 replicates of this setup. We found that we got better results with our MATLAB tracking by putting bling on the back of scorpions. And we found this little mirrored thing that I got at Michael's works the best. So we could really follow the scorpion in the arena. And here's an example. This is a sample MATLAB plot of an all-night filming of one of the scorpions. So it's automatically tracking the animal, and it's placing its point every 1 second. And we found consistent activity patterns in the animals we saw. Here's just one animal through 7 consecutive nights. These arrows show when the lights turned off and when the lights turned on. And you can see they walk a lot, several football fields every night. but there's a consistent pattern through the day and the night. And this is borne out when you look across all animals. And we looked at actually 23 animals in this analysis and about 1,500 hours of video.
10 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, here's a burrow that's at the station, a natural burrow off of one of the trails. And here's an animal making a burrow in these arenas. And I'll just show you a little gallery of some of the burrows that we found. There's really well-formed burrows throughout. And you can see the bling on the back of this scorpion. Well, now we wanted to find the initial indication of learning walks. And to do this, we time-lapse the videos in MATLAB, and we put a dot over every time the program detected the animal, and we looked at the previous 3 frames to make a sort of stardust spray to make it more easy to find the situation. This is going to be about 3.5 minutes of video, greatly compressed. I just want to show you an example. We're looking for where the animal first moves into the middle someplace and lingers and digs. There it is right there. And now we're going to track the subsequent movements. It's these looping movements that we noticed, and that's what we're interested in. And we think these might be learning walks. And this is a plot of the one that you just saw. And to process this pattern, what we did was we asked MATLAB to calculate the distance from the burrow over time, as well as basically the velocity of the animal over the same time period. And then basically we transform using those data into distance from the burrow by path length. And then we could place a line at each point that the animal returned to the burrow and superimpose those loops. And that's what all of these look like. And basically, I'm not going to spend much time here just to show you that they essentially all do it. Once they find a point that they start to dig, they do these looping behaviors. In fact, we had 23 animals, and here's 18 of them. And the only ones that we didn't have, either the resolution was too poor or it was outside the filming window. And then we superimposed all these walks, and there were 80 of them. And essentially, each animal does on average about 4.4 initial walks. Now, it's not like that's the only thing they do. They'll also do subsequent walks later in the recordings. Here's a case where the first walk is documented, but 10 minutes later, it did some more loops. At 25 minutes, some more. And at 47 minutes, it went crazy and started doing these really major loops all the time, returning back to the burrow. Okay, so we think that we also see clear evidence that scorpions might be doing learning walks. I just want to share one more thing with you. There's a lot of information in these data. For example, here are 3 all-night plots, and we just put a little square around what we think is the burrow in these plots, and we asked MATLAB to look at the previous 20 seconds and the following 20 seconds. And what you see is very interesting. We see these clear inbound paths that are different from the outbound paths. And this seems to also suggest a possible role for familiarity. Now, I'm just going to recap with this little cartoon to try to let you think about what we're thinking about. So here's a scorpion, and this is a naive scorpion. I've got a burrow, but I might get lost if I ever left. So we think the scorpion first makes small walking loops and learns the taste and the texture around its burrow. And then later, I'll go further afield in search of prey and use path integration to return, all the while learning more taste and textures along the way towards my burrow. And now we've got a very experienced expert scorpion. I can go to my burrow from anywhere in the land. And that's what we're talking about. And I want to thank all of these people and these resources for their great support, as well as my grandnieces for these lovely pictures of scorpions. And I'll take any questions. Thanks.
You got a minute.
That's it. I'm done. I'll take.
So, quick question. Do you think any of the scorpions are laying down chemicals to mark their area, like ants? And then I guess the other question is, does this approach work with a bunch of other arachnids, and have you tried it?
Okay, can you still hear me? Let me stop sharing here and make it a little easier. Are we good? Can you hear?
Doug, I'm going to actually move on here. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, simply put, they don't return breadcrumbs. They don't follow back breadcrumbs that they lay down.
Okay. So